greatness. In fact, as I was thinking about what I would talk about here today, I thought about the Florida story. And when you compare that story to the story of Washington, D.C. over the last 6 years, it's pretty compelling, I think. And Governor Scott deserves a lot of credit for implementing conservative ideas, sticking with it, making sure government doesn't grow faster than people's ability to pay for it. And the net result is that we're now back on track. Personal income is growing fast. If I had to think about what the Florida story looks like, it is a story of applying conservative principles in the right way, consistently, where we advance the cause of limited government and entrepreneurial capitalism to be able to create more freedom and more prosperity than any government program ever created. That's part of it, for sure. It's to have a passion for reform, because things in government don't just go quietly into the night. They just don't go away when it's time for them to be put away. In fact, we have to constantly challenge how government works each and every day to make it more relevant in the world that we're moving towards, rather than be stuck in some kind of mid-20th century industrial model. So the second part of it is, wherever there's a problem that can be fixed in government, we ought to fix it with reforms that move our state forward. And the third thing that I'm proud about our state, and I think it's part of the Florida model, is our resiliency. We're a resilient place. We don't get in line really well. We're the kind of state that is dynamic and aspirational, and the dreams that we have might be bigger than other places. And people come from all over the world and all over our country to pursue their dreams. And it may not always work out the way the central planners want it to be, but the net result is, by believing in limited government, by having a passion for reform, and having a resiliency that is the envy of the rest of the country, Florida's done really well. And I'm really proud to have been governor of this state for 8 years, and I'm proud of the work that Governor Scott has done as well. As I look back on my time as governor, it is really kind of a stark contrast to what is going on in Washington, D.C., particularly as it relates to the budget and the economy. In Washington, D.C., under President Obama, we've had a $1 trillion tax increase to fund Obamacare, and then $600 billion over 10 years because he could, another tax increase. In Florida, for 8 years, we cut taxes every year, totaling $19 billion, creating a much better business climate. In Washington, D.C., during the president's time, the debt is almost doubled to $18 trillion, an unsustainable number on the track that it's on. And our national government lost its AAA bond rating status. In Florida, you might remember when I started, we had a little under $1 billion of reserves, and that grew to close to $10 billion over 8 years. We fully funded our pension obligations so that the retirees of our pension system know that they'll be able to get the benefits that they've earned. We reduced the government workforce by 13,000, 11% during my 8 years. And I was called a lot of things when I was governor. I'm looking around to see if any of you called me a few things. But I was called Vito Corleone, which is the one I loved the most, because we reduced the size of government by creating discipline, by making sure that every process was adhered to. And the net result was that after 2,500 separate line items in the budget and $2 billion of reductions, there was a discipline. Government didn't grow faster than people's income. And so the net result there was, instead of being a AA bond rated state, we went to AAA bond rating. Higher credit rating than the United States government. Conservative principles applied the right way can yield great results. And by the way, kudos to Governor Scott for doing something I don't believe any other state has done in the last few years, which is to reduce the state debt level in a nominal basis by $4 billion. That's the kind of government that we need. Under President Obama, we've had the weakest economic recovery in modern history. We're cranking along at about a 2% growth rate. That's called the new normal now. I don't know about you, but I get nauseous when I hear people use this new terminology, which is a terminology of defeatism, a terminology of defining things downward. A great nation should be aspiring to far better than 2% growth. 40% of the 8.5 million people that are unemployed have given up looking altogether. Workforce participation rates today are lower than they were 40 years ago. And this, 30 years ago, excuse me. And 5 more million people are living in poverty today in the age of Obama. Median household income, really the definition of the great middle of our country, in the last 6 years now is down $2,100. No wonder people think we're on the wrong track. No wonder many people still think that we're in a recession, because they are. In Florida, during my 8 years, we grew at 4.4% per year. And we created together, many of the people in this room, by creating a better environment, we created 1.3 million net new jobs. More jobs created than Texas, more jobs created than any state in the country other than California, a state 2.5 times our size. And guess what? During those 8 years, household median income went up by over $1,000. Is that important? Sure as heck it's important for the people that want to be able to decide. They may want to have savings for their kid going to college, or they may want to take a vacation because times had been tough, or maybe they'll be able to do whatever they darn well please. The simple fact is, when you have rising income because you have higher economic growth, the demands on government lessen, and people can pursue their dreams as they see fit. That should be the definition of the future for this country. The second element of the Florida story is reform. And man, we did a lot of it when I was governor, and this governor continues to do the same. Medicaid is a place that just is like the Cookie Monster for budgets. It eats everything in its way. And it was doing that in the first years while I was governor, but we created a reform that now has gone statewide that lessens the growth of Medicaid in terms of the per person costs and improves outcomes. The notion that somehow people that are qualified for Medicaid are too poor to make decisions for themselves, I reject out of hand, and I hope you do as well. People empowered with right choices, with accurate information, will make the right choice for their family. If you give them more choices, they'll be able to improve their chance. We should have a Medicaid system, insurance system, that looks more like private insurance, where we respect the dignity of each person, lowering costs and providing better outcomes for all of us. That's exactly the Florida model, and that model should be applied in Washington, D.C. as well. We had the second highest workers' compensation premiums in the country, only to California. Our costs were astronomical, and we got together with the business community and with all sorts of other groups, and under the leadership of a great public servant in this state, Tony Jennings, and the Florida legislature, we reformed our workers' compensation system. And guess what? The premium reductions were equal to $400 million of savings a year. You don't think that didn't create some jobs? Of course it did. Every chance that we've had to be able to reform, whether it was our tort system or our workers' comp system or across the spectrum of government, every chance that we had to reform things, we tried to do it. And the one place I'm most proud of what we reformed is our education system. When I was elected governor, we were 50th out of 50 in high school graduation rate. We had an 8th grade level aptitude test to graduate from high school. I'll never forget being in Seminole High School up the road here in just north of here, where I went into a lab, a computer lab, where a kid was taking the FCAT, the predecessor of the FCAT, the HSCT test, for the last time. If he didn't pass it this time, he wasn't going to be able to graduate from high school. The question he was struggling with was, a baseball game starts at 3. It ends at 4:30. How long is the game? I don't know about you, but that is devastating to think that we spend more per student than any country in the world other than a couple of rounding errors, to be honest with you. Now, Florida's spending at that time wasn't the highest for sure, but we spend a lot of money. And at the end of the journey, a child can't answer that question. How do we expect that child to be able to live a life of purpose and meaning? How do we expect that child to be able to get a job, or be able to go to community college, or to be able to go to the universities? It put something in my soul that made me more committed to be able to change our education system, and thanks to the leadership in the Florida legislature, we did that. We created And we didn't do it just one year. We did it across the board. Just as Governor Scott and the legislature today continues to provide reform, we did it that way as well. the first statewide voucher program in the country, grading schools in a way that moms and dads completely understood, ending social promotion, this insidious policy that says that the child in 3rd grade that is functionally illiterate, it's okay to pass them on to 4th grade as though they're going to be able to miraculously understand science and math and be able to read and do all the things that we expect of them. We created the Corporate Tax Scholarship Program, the McKay Scholarship Program. We expanded charter schools. We raised standards. We created accountability that was the model for many other states in the country. And guess what? Conservative principles based on a passion for reform created the following results. Our graduation rate is no longer 50th out of 50 states. We're about at the national average, and we've had improvement over the last 15 years. We lead the nation in early literacy, thanks to the work of great teachers in our elementary schools, and our 4th graders are at the top in almost every category. Florida's Hispanic kids do 2 grade levels ahead of their counterparts in the country. Florida's low-income Hispanic kids, by the way, do better than the California average on the 4th grade NAEP test, the nation's report card. I reject the notion that conservatives don't care about people being stuck in poverty. I see Will Weatherford, my good friend here, who spent 2 years as Speaker, a conservative, reform-minded Speaker that focused on this very issue. Making sure that everybody has a chance to rise up is the way we win politically, but more importantly, it's the way that you create a sustainable community and a sustainable state. I applaud what you did, Will, and I believe that's our path to success. And finally, a little bit about resiliency, because it's deeply understated. But we're now on the 10th anniversary of the second hurricane season. Some of you that might have been involved in this remember this stuff. I do. I'm curious to know why we haven't had a storm. Governor Scott, you're fortunate, trust me. But we had 8 hurricanes, 4, no knocking on wood, 4 tropical storms, 8 hurricanes in 17 months. Over $100 billion of insured losses, just to remind everybody. The whole world was turned upside down. People were hurting. But you should have seen, if you weren't around then, because a lot of people are coming into Florida for the first time, you should have seen how this state responded. The resiliency of the state of Florida has always been there, but it was tested in a way that was extraordinary during those 2004 and 2005 hurricane seasons. I am so proud to be a Floridian, because what I saw were neighbors helping neighbors. What I saw were state government workers all of a sudden becoming like Steve Jobs-like in their creativity and in their ability to figure out a different way of doing things. I saw people acting on their heart in a way that allowed us to restore economic growth. And we recovered far faster than what anybody imagined. And no one complained, best I could tell, no one complained about the response of local and state emergency responders. That is the way you create a better state, is when you truly need the help of government. After 9/11 or during hurricanes like this, that people are dedicated, they're trained, they're committed, there's resources applied so that you can get back on track. After 9/11, no one thought that Florida was going to be able to recover as fast as it did. But we did. And it's because our resiliency is in our DNA. And I'm proud of that as well. So going forward, wouldn't it be better to have that kind of philosophy in Washington, D.C., if you think about it? A philosophy that believes that limiting government and creating an environment where personal income grows at a faster rate is the first priority, that we create economic growth above all else. That should be the mission of the next President of the United States. We should be growing at 4%, not this new normal. The new normal is going to create too many demands on government. The new normal is not going to lift our spirits. The new normal will create an environment where people won't be able to rise up, whether they're in poverty or stuck in the middle. What we need is to go back to the 4% strategy, and we can do it. We're the only country in the developed world that could actually renew itself and become young and aspirational and dynamic again. But it's going to require fixing a lot of things that are broken right now that haven't been tended to in Washington. We have to fix one of the most convoluted, complex tax codes by lowering rates and eliminating as many exemptions as possible. We have to fix what has become the most complicated, confusing, intrusive regulatory system. This president, because he has no relationship with Congress, because he can't cross the aisle, because there's no trust anymore in Washington. We used to complain about when I was running for office and then for the first years I was in Tallahassee. Remember we called it Mount Tallahassee? Well, Mount Washington, D.C. is even more removed, more cronied up, more stuck in the old way. And the net result is our regulatory system now is used for incumbents to protect the aspirants. It is used in a way that creates tremendous problems for the long-term nature of our country. If we're going to grow at 4%, we need to challenge every aspect of how rules are done. We should undo the executive orders that this president has done because he couldn't go to Congress to do what he should have done. We need to make sure that men and women of subject matter expertise are there doing the work rather than being disqualified because somehow they have some knowledge of the subject matter in the old alphabet soup of regulatory agencies. We need to protect and enhance and strengthen the 10th Amendment to wherever possible to shift power back to the states, whether it's EPA or the Department of Education, across the board. It is much better done in Tallahassee and at the local level than it's done in Washington, D.C. And finally, we need to challenge the assumption that the best way to make sure that the public good is satisfied is to make it harder for us to grow economically. That there should be a balance between our economic interests and whatever the well-intended idea is to try to create a chance to solve something through rules. We need immigration reform, for crying out loud. A broken immigration system puts drains on our economy, but if we fixed it and made it an economic driver so that we would be younger and more dynamic, we could grow at a far faster rate. We need an energy strategy based on North American resources and American ingenuity, and American technology, and American entrepreneurship. If we did that, we could be energy secure in relatively short order. The benefits of this would allow us to reindustrialize our country, creating economic opportunities. It would allow the consumers to continue to get the best deal that they ever have gotten over the last decade of time, lower utility bills, lower gasoline prices, and it would allow us to have a national security based on our values, rather than having to have a heavy footprint overseas to defend our economic interests. And it would also allow us to use it as a tool for national security purposes to deal with the problems of Russia holding Europe blackmail or other parts of the world. We need government reform across the board. Mount Tallahassee, as I said, is a tiny hill compared to Mount Washington, D.C., and every aspect of how Washington works needs to be challenged to make it better. We need to shrink the beast, of course, but the government should be in the cloud. Why is it that we can't operate like we do in every aspect of our lives? Why can't we demand that our federal government operate with the same efficiencies that we have to do? I'm going to Estonia this next week, going to Germany and Poland and Estonia. And as I was briefing myself and learning about Estonia, this really cool, tiny country, you can fill out your tax return in Estonia online in 5 minutes. That should be a worthy aspiration for a great nation. 5 minutes online. Finally, I think we need leadership, because what I've noticed in the last few years is that people have gotten really good about talking about things and about saying how bad things are and about saying how their political adversary doesn't have the right motives. And the net result is nothing gets done. I yearn for the days where things get done so that we can see the success, so that more people have a chance to be able to live their dreams as they see fit. And I know our democracy is not ended in this country. We've been in existence for 239 years. We might have had a decade of dysfunction. To restore the regular order way of passing budgets, of assuming that people that don't agree with you don't ascribe bad motives, of finding the Nixon to China moments where we can have breakthroughs to be able to fix these big complex things, has to be the mission of the next President of the United States. And if we can do this, this is going to be the most extraordinary time to be alive as an American. We're on the verge of the most wondrous time to be alive. I've got a grandchild, and I'll close with this. His name is Jack. I was hopeful his name was going to be Jeb, so I'm holding out for a 5th grandchild. Little Jack, he's a cute little guy. He's a month and a half old. On the day he was born, I was reading I forgot which newspaper. It might have been the Wall Street Journal. That's what I normally read. And in this article, there was a researcher that was publishing a study that said that it's likely children born now are likely to live till they're 130 years old. I totally believe it. In fact, I know it to be true. We're curing diseases. We're changing the destiny of the world because of American technology and American innovation. The question is, are we going to get out of the way to allow that to cascade into our lives where people have the chance to achieve earned success? Are we going to create barriers for it to become true so that more and more, making it harder for more and more people to rise up? I honestly believe that we have it within our capabilities to fix these things, and that we'll create a right to rise society where America will lead the world for the next generations to come. Thank you all very much. Robert. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you. We got 9 minutes and 1 second for questions. Yes.
Yeah, Governor, thank you very much. Bob Long, Sarasota.
Hey, Bob.
Excellent.
How's your business, by the way?
It's going very well. Thank you very much, and thanks to the governor, too. And also thanks to the governor for putting this together. I mean, he and his people did a fabulous job of putting this together. And it's good seeing you. The little bit of concern is we've heard from a lot of great people today. They're pretty much preaching to the choir, of course, but it's hard to distinguish and differentiate.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Okay, you're the best, I guess, right? But you know, going forward, it is I don't know if it's called a concern, that what happens going forward, how to differentiate themselves without tearing each other apart. You know, the money's going to be spread very thin. It's got to go over a lot of candidates, and there's going to be a temptation. You see a little bit of it already, and one Republican tearing another one down.